bonus big ideas welcome content. So thank you for listening, and thank you to Johnathan Clark, Courageous, for joining us on the podcast. If you have listened to the episode, you've heard John's, it goes beyond passion, right? Mm-hmm. Because passion can be lost.
Yeah.
You know, it goes into passion and process, and the things that you put in place to make yourself, right?
Right.
To make yourself continue that, to make something out of nothing. So talk a little bit about coming from your background, right, as a performer, as a professional. What were some of those barriers that made you originally think, quote unquote, they do versus I can?
It was always, for me, it was always, I struggled in academia. I loved it, but I struggled I never fit in. I always was. I remember in high school, I had to take geometry twice because I actually took every math class I took in high school twice. And it wasn't that I was bad at it. I made my geometry teacher, Miss White, every test that I had, I never made anything less than a 92. Every quiz, I never made anything less than a 90. And I had a 0% for my homework average. I had no desire to do homework. Homework was 30% of your grade. And had I made 100s on all the tests instead of A's or B's on every test and quiz, then I would have passed with a C. But you had to pass with a C or better to pass the class. So I made a D in geometry, not failing, never getting lower than a 92 on a test. And it was like, why would you hold this kid back? He doesn't need to do the homework. It's not a thing. So I got into the next class, and my teacher, Coach Allen, was like, dude, if you'll just shut up, I'll give you a B. But they did the work, and they were the A students, and I was the kid who was trying to pass or trying to crack the best joke in class. Like it meant more to me to be the valedictorian. I'd rather be the most funniest in the school. Like that was what my priorities were. So I never really did well in school. I didn't want to study. If I didn't need to study and could pass the test without studying, not gonna do it. So it was always like academia and psychology. But I got into psychology. It was my first class at the University of Tennessee. Somehow I managed to work my way into not meeting with my advisor. I got in a 300 level psych class. It was my very first class as a freshman. I actually started UT when I was 17. So I was 17 years old going into a 300 level psych class, and I loved it more than anything in the world. I just felt like I was in the right place at the right time, and everything was so cool. But then as we went further, that math, statistics, all those kind of things, it was just, there was always something that was holding me back. So I started to develop really this like imposter syndrome because I always thought it was for other people, and this was just for me to enjoy on the side. Like their majors were my elective. Like I could be there, and they were doing the things while I was stuck back here not being able to pass the right classes and do the things. So it was just always seeing it from the outside. I was an intern at Cole Neuroscience Center for all of like a whole summer, and like they wanted me to do the things where I talk to patients. They wanted my personality, but they didn't want me to be part of the science. And it was like, okay, well, how can we blend these things? Like, how can I be? They just wanted me out in front to. It was kind of disheartening. I was working with Alzheimer's patients, and it's like giving them tests that were technically they were failing because, of course, they had Alzheimer's. So cognitive awareness wasn't the biggest thing for them at the time. So it was a little disheartening. It was kind of rough. But they asked, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to do research. I would love to be part of the people that were, and they were like, I don't know. Research is probably not your thing. We're looking at your grades, and it's probably not going to work out. So it's always that they do. And it's never that I could do that. Never that I could be in a position I wanted to be in. And then it was just kind of one day after all these things, all these experiences with 100 Knox and Candace and Catherine and Rob Cochran, shout out to my man Rob, my mentor, and it's just all these people that were just like, dude, you need to do this. Like, you should really do this. And then it just started to switch. a light bulb kind of went off, and I said I should really try to make this happen. And now that I've gotten in it, I'm working with the University of Tennessee and the Cancer Support Center of East Tennessee, and one of the doctors that's on the program. I'm now a subcontractor for the University of Tennessee. They're paying me a nice contract to be able to go back and work with UT. And one of the doctors that's on the work right now. So I'll be doing this kind of work, the artwork, basically for adolescents who've been diagnosed with cancer and their families. So it's one of the coolest, like, passion projects also, but to be able to introduce the art to these young people who need it in more of a scientific form. Sure. They need this art form, to be able to, a lot of kids who get diagnosed with this disease they tend to go into depression and avoidant behavior, and the arts and performance it's all, for me, that's done that all my life. I've been performing since I was 13. And that's who I was when I was younger. I didn't have a cancer diagnosis, but I didn't want to be avoidant. I was always like avoiding the spotlight and those kind of things. And then I started performing, and it changed who I was. And then I got to see what art could do for communities, and it changed what I wanted to do. And then I got to see how you could put all of this together with a psychological science that proves exactly what I've always believed in my heart, that these things change who you are and change how you look at the world. But even with theater, using exercises for like role play, and these things are going to be what I introduce to the families, so that they can really start to see how each other are thinking in better forms of communication. So offering them poetry and offering them acting and role play exercises that I've learned that have always helped me figure things out on stage and in performance. But now I get to bring it to them as a therapeutic kind of, I can't call it therapy. But we can call it wellness, and we can call it these kind of things that'll help people step outside themselves for a moment and really develop empathy and develop understanding. So I also use the work with artificial intelligence to do diversity, equity, inclusion work. Just making it, because empathy, it's all there. So just giving people opportunities to understand bias and understand what it feels like to be in other people's shoes, which is exactly what acting is supposed to be, So it all is there. It's when you decide to be in another character's shoes, it just so happens this character may be your boss or your HR manager or whatever it may be. So when we go into businesses and organizations, these are the kind of things that I'm trying to set up.
So the confluence of art and life, the confluence of art, and when I say art, that image comes to mind of just the painter in their studio by themselves, creating this masterpiece or whatever. But one of the things that I think you can speak to better than anybody is that art does not actually happen in a vacuum.
Oh, yeah.
Creativity does not happen in a vacuum. And a lot of people that maybe are watching or have listened to the podcast, we've got a pretty diverse audience. We have scientists, we have engineers, we have all these people, folks that don't necessarily think of themselves as quote unquote creative. Mm-hmm. Right? You always hear that. Well, I couldn't draw a stick figure. Man. Well, I don't know I could never do, this. What do you say to that person that may have that they do, not I can attitude when it comes to creativity, when it comes to unlocking that side of themselves that lets them see over that horizon line?
I really challenge people to stop thinking. Thinking gets in people's ways so much. Overthinking and just believing more that you can't do something is such a barrier to actually doing it. That's why I really like to use, when I do workshops, one of my favorite things is the art form of haiku. 17 syllables. It's about as simple as it gets when it comes to creating something. But when you can use 17 syllables, and I blend it with the opportunity for storytelling. So I try to make it as easy for people as possible. It depends on what organization I'm going. I've done this work with veterans, with PTSD, with young people, with just adverse childhood experiences, like all the groups that I've worked with. It's the easiest thing to tailor a prompt to them and to have them write a haiku in response to that prompt. And it gets out of, and the one thing I use is time. I think the idea of concise effort, just making this, taking away all the time that you have to overthink I think that's the biggest thing. Everybody can. There's a I think Mos Def had he had a piece in the song. If you can walk, you can. If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. And it's just these ideas that, like, if you can do the most basic things, you can turn them into some kind of art form. So it's this idea that if you can use words, if you know how to use words, then if you're literate usually, then you can create a haiku. And if you can create a haiku, that means you're an artist. And if you're an artist, it means there's no limitations that you can set upon yourself. So if you can do this very small piece, there's a phenomenon in psychology, foot in the door. And it's basically if you can just get somebody's foot in the door, you can convince them to run through a brick wall. Like it's that kind of opportunity. So just the foot in the door, get that little piece, and a haiku is the simplest way to do it, just to get people out of their own heads and give them a time to, all right, you have 2 minutes to think of these things and go. And then time it. And then, all right, take those things, cut out half of them. Just cut up half of them. Cut them out. You use them. Congratulations. That's a trick to kind of make their minds start to focus on the things, and then cut them out. And when you cut them out, it's kind of symbolic. Like you're not thinking about those things anymore. So now I'm teaching them focus, teaching them agency by choosing their own ideas. Now you take one of those, after all the things you cut out, half of them, cut out one and decide to write your haiku on this one. And this may be about an experience in your life. And then, okay, now write the haiku. Haiku is 17 syllables. Now they're focused on the syllables. They're not focused on, I don't know how to write a haiku. They're focused on the syllables, and they're counting. You can see them. Like, okay. And then it's like, I came up with something cool. And to watch these people that, no, I don't create, especially veterans, like, man, these guys like I don't do this kind of thing. No. And then they're like, I did something cool. I like this. And then they then get them to share it. And then it's like, you just see the change in these people just like that. And I can do that workshop in 20 minutes. So to watch people change from, no, I don't think I'm gonna, to like, I can't wait to share with you the art that I created. It's one of the best feelings in the world. That's my why. Like, that's my thing, is to get people that opportunity to get out of their own way and create something. And if I have tailored it with some kind of prompt that has created a purpose for it, that's where my art is. Like, that's where the goal is for me, is to get them and kind of be the guide, be the shaman in that kind of sense, to give people kind of the path that will get them out of their own way. And there's a lot of psychology and science behind it, but also for me, 25 years of artistic practice involved as well. So that's kind of where the intersection is for me.
John, this is fun. So
indeed,
and I think just to sort of wrap things up, here is, you've also been part of the Mayor's Maker Council for the past couple of years.
Yep.
So you have seen the community come together. Mm-hmm. What does it mean? We're talking about individuals. We're talking about your personal journey. Then we're talking about the folks that you have worked with, both as an artist and as an inspirational person that mm-hmm. brings somebody out of their shell.
Yeah.
Right. What has it meant? What have you seen around a community that started to come out of its shell?
Man, do you know, one of the biggest, I think for me, the experience that I had, I got to be a mentor for What's the Big Idea. And I watched, there were six participants, but I watched this group of people that had never known each other before. I think there were 8 of us that were part of, I think you just had Jalaria on the show, and with Jalaria, that's actually how Jalaria was in my co-starters program. And then also I was one of her mentors for spacecraft. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. It was exhausting. I'll tell you, the whole weekend I was exhausted. I didn't know I was committing that much time. And she was there more than I was, of course. But watching this whole group of people come together, and here's my resources, here's what I know how to do. All right, what do you know how to do? What do you know how to do? All right, let's go. Let's all put each other in the best positions to succeed, and let's do this thing. And it looked like what I want our world to look like. It didn't matter what people looked like. It mattered what your experiences were. It mattered how much you were willing to help, how much time you had available to offer, what you were willing to offer. but everybody had the same goal of making sure that success was at the end of it. And that was kind of how I feel about the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center and how I feel about the Mayor's Maker City Council. Like, when you put all of this effort together and all these resources and you combine, it's kind of almost Captain Planet. Like, when you combine all of our resources combined, it's like you get to combine all these things to create something that's much larger than the sum of its parts. And that's kind of what allows me, like, that's why I want to be part of this for as long as I can be. Like, it's just being part of something that makes things bigger, being part of something that makes our city better, being part of something that makes our community grow closer. Like, that to me is everything. So just seeing what people can do when they put their resources out there and the egos are set aside for a moment. It's not like, what am I getting out of this? It's like, what can we get out of this? So it's like you change I to we, and a lot of things look a little different.
Johnathan, thank you so much for being with us and for
Thank
the work
you, man.
that you do. Thank you. If you're watching this, we appreciate you. And if you want to learn more about like Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, just knoxcc.com, or follow us on social. Hit up themakercity.org to learn about Maker City. Where can folks find you?
You can find me on all of the things, Instagram at Mr. MISTERC_rage. You can find me on LinkedIn. Johnathan Clark Courageous is where I spend most of my time lately. And you can also find me, of course, on the Mayor's Maker City Council and at the Maker City Summit, September 8th through the 10th at the Maker Exchange, downtown Knoxville.